when do you replenish the stock product, and how much do you buy when you issue that replenishment order? And this is a very, very good subject to deal with because it is going to control not only how much material you have in your warehouses or in your stores, but the level of service you provide your customers. Because if you replenish stock at the right time, you won't experience stockouts. How much you buy is going to really be a big factor in determining your profitability. Now, the first thing that we need to do when deciding when to replenish stock is to divide your inventory up into two different groups, those items that have recurring usage and those items that have sporadic usage. Okay? There are two different methodologies for replenishing these products. Recurring usage items are those that are sold or used on a regular basis. As you can see on this screen, they have had usage or sales in at least 8 of the past 12 months, or they've had usage in 3 consecutive months within the past 12 months. Those are going to be your seasonal items. Also falling into the seasonal categories are those products that have had usage in 1 or 2 consecutive months in the past 12 months if they are associated with a holiday or an annual occurrence of some sort. Items that fall into one of those 3 classifications have recurring usage. We're going to get to those in a little bit, but we're going to start by looking at items that have sporadic usage. Those are items that have not been sold or used on a regular basis. You see an example of one of these items on this screen. We sold 50 in December, 20 back in August, 50 back in March. We don't want to have a system try and forecast demand based on some average of past usage. For sporadic usage items, we're going to base our replenishment parameters on a multiple of the typical or normal sales quantity. That is, we don't sell it that often, but when we sell it or when we use it, how many does the customer ask for, or how many do we need? Those products with recurring usage, you're going to see a little later on. We can set replenishment parameters based on a normal quantity sold or used in one transaction. Now, back to the sporadic usage items. Again, they're not sold or used on a regular basis, so we have to figure out how many are we going to use when we actually use the product, or how many do our customers actually ask for. Okay? This is going to be the greater of the mean hit average, the adjusted mean average, the median average, or the mode average. This is the normal quantity sold or used. You know, I used a lot of different averages. And actually, if you think back, when you were in elementary school, you learned that there were several different averages. You probably learned about the mean, the median, and the mode average. And if you're like most people, when you got out of high school, you forgot about all of the averages except for one. If I were to ask you to take the average of 12 numbers, you would add them up and divide by 12. That is, in fact, what we call the mean average. Well, there are other averages. The mean hit average would be the quantity you sold or used over the past 12 months divided by the number of hits in the past 12 months. Now, you might ask, what is a hit? A hit is a request for an item. When a customer comes in and asks for an item, whether they ask for 1 piece, 10 pieces, or 1,000 pieces, it is just one hit, one transaction. Think of it as a line item on an invoice or a sales order. The mean hit average is 12-month sales quantity divided by the number of hits recorded in the past 12 months. On slide number 7, you can see down at the bottom that we had 4 hits or 4 transactions for this item in the past 12 months. If you scan that usage history, Again, we sold 50 in December, 20 in August. If you look over towards the right, 50 in March, that's a total of 120. So if we take that 120 and divide by 4, we get 30. The mean hit average would be 30 pieces. The adjusted mean average is 12-month sales, not divided by 12, but divided by the number of months with sales or usage activity. In this case, we had 3 months, December, August, and back in March, with sales or usage activity. So the adjusted mean average would be 120 divided by 3, or 40 pieces. The median average, if we were to sort 20, 50, and 50, those are our 3 months with usage activity, if we were to sort them in ascending order, we take the one in the middle. The one in the middle is the median average. That would be 50. The mode average, still a perfectly good average. And that's the most common non-zero quantity. Well, if we have 50, 20, and 50, the most common non-zero value is 50. Now we're going to take the largest of those the largest of those 4 averages, and that's going to be our normal usage quantity. In this case, it would be 50 pieces. What I'm saying is, when we sell or use this product, we typically sell 50 pieces. Now, once we know how many we normally sell, then we just need to decide how many of those normal sales quantities are we going to keep in inventory. Now, typically we'll say the longer the lead time for the item, the more activity, the more normal use quantities I want to keep in stock. For example, if I have a relatively short lead time, maybe under 30 days, and I only sell it once or twice a year, as you can see on this chart, I might want to keep just 1 normal sales quantity in stock. What that would mean is I'd keep a minimum of 0, a maximum of 1. In other words, when I sold the one on the shelf, I'd go out and buy another one. But if I had a longer lead time, or I had more transactions during the year, now I don't know when those transactions are going to occur. I just know I typically will sell it 3 or 4 times or 5 or 6 times a year. I might not want to keep 1, but 2 normal transactions on the shelf. In this example, my normal usage quantity is 50 pieces. 2 transactions would be 2 times 50, or 100 pieces. That's what I want to keep on the shelf. When I sell 1 normal transaction, when I get down to 50, I'm going to buy up to 100. Okay? Stocking products with sporadic usage. Using this method, stocking them based on a multiple of the normal quantities sold or used in 1 transaction, provides very, very good customer service. We don't run out of these products. Our customers can count on us having these items when they require them. Now, one of the nice things about items with sporadic usage is that they tend to remain items with sporadic usage for a long period of time. You don't have to look at these items every month. Usually, if you look at them once or twice a year and modify the parameters, you'll be fine. This allows us to spend more time maintaining our items that have recurring usage. These are the items that are sold or used on a regular basis. Now, I said before, you can predict what you will sell or use of these products based on what we think our forecast of what we're going to sell during a specific month. Okay? That's what we call a demand forecast. Now, items that have recurring usage will not have 1 minimum quantity. We, in fact, are going to maintain them based with 2 minimum quantities. Okay? The first minimum quantity we're going to call the order point. Okay? The order point for our first minimum quantity is equal to our forecast demand per day times the lead time. That is, how many are we going to sell times the amount of time it's going to take us to get that product from our vendor. Now, let's just stop right there. If I were to sell 2 pieces a day, that's my demand forecast, and I had a lead time of, say, 7 days. 2 times 7 is 14 pieces. Theoretically, if I reordered this product when I had 14 pieces on the shelf, I would sell 2 pieces per day during my 7-day lead time, and I would be receiving the replenishment shipment in when I was selling the last piece of this product. But the demand forecast, no matter how good you get that demand forecast, is still an estimate. Okay? Still a prediction of what we're going to sell. I might sell more, or I might not receive the replenishment shipment in the time period of my anticipated lead time. The vendor might be late in getting me that replenishment shipment because I might sell more than I thought I would sell, or there might be a delay in receiving that replenishment shipment. Maintain some safety stock or reserve insurance inventory to make sure I don't run out of stock. Now, say here the replenishment position of a product, my net stock available should not fall below its order point without the item being reordered. Now, this is going to ensure that you have great customer service, but we need to be sure that we have an accurate forecast, an accurate lead time, and enough safety stock to protect our desired level of customer service. Now, during the last webinar, we spent quite a bit of time discussing your forecast. Now I want to look at the other 2 elements of this order, the lead time and safety stock quantity. The anticipated lead time is the amount of time, usually measured in days, we estimate it will take to replenish our stock of an item. Now, if you want to have a best-breed, state-of-the-art system, you're going to maintain anticipated lead time separately for each item in each warehouse from each supplier or source of supply. Okay? You don't want to mix lead times from several different sources of supply because you won't get a true indication of how long it's going to take to get your next replenishment shipment. Order points in computer software packages are based on the anticipated lead time from the primary source of supply, the vendor or the warehouse where you normally get replenishment shipments. Now, you can calculate this based on the average of the several most recent lead times, or in most systems, we can set the anticipated lead times manually. And this is especially important if you know the average lead time for the next shipment may be different from the lead times from previous shipments. Something else is going on in the market. Now, if you allow your system to calculate an average lead time, be sure that you have the settings in your system set correctly so that you are only averaging, let's call them meaningful lead times associated with stock receipts. For example, you want to be sure that if you are calculating the lead time, you're only considering lead times associated with stock receipts from the primary source of supply. Also, you've received at least 50% of the total quantity you ordered in a shipment. For example, say you ordered 100 pieces of a line item from a supplier, and the supplier only sent you 1/20th of what you ordered. I wouldn't want to consider that lead time in the average lead time because that probably isn't reflective of how long it truly takes to get that material in from the vendor. I would want to receive at least 51 of the 100 pieces. We also want to be sure that lead times used to calculate an average lead time have been received relatively recently, say within the last 6 months. Things change over time, and if I received something a year or 2 years ago, it probably isn't reflective of what the lead time is today. Finally, we want to be sure that the lead times are not abnormally late or early. You can have a very late lead time because the vendor forgot to place it on his order or it got lost. That isn't reflective of what future shipments are going to have as far as the lead time is concerned. Also, if you normally ship by, say, truck or by ocean freight, and you receive an emergency shipment in by air freight, that again is probably an abnormally short lead time, and you don't want that to be included in your calculations of an average lead time. The average lead time.
All participants have been muted.
And you can see that we just take a simple average of the last several lead times. Here I had a lead time of 12 days in July, a lead time of 14 days in August. The average of those two is 13 days. Now, a lot of systems will calculate an average lead time, and they usually do it very, very well. But sometimes, often I should say, they don't take into account the total picture of a lead time. If you consider, and if you just think about it, there are a lot of elements in an average lead, there are a lot of elements in what I'm calling an anticipated lead time. For example, the time it takes you to place an order. Once you realize you need stock, the time it takes the vendor to process the order and ship you the material, the time it takes the material to get to your warehouse after the vendor has shipped it, the transportation time. Finally, the time it takes you to prepare that stock receipt for sale or for use, what we typically call stock to stock time. Now, if you add all 4 of those elements up, you get an anticipated lead time. And we found it is best practice to maintain lead times manually. And I like to set lead times equal to, and I'm going to say this very carefully, the longest normally anticipated lead time from the primary vendor. I'm going to say that again. The longest normally anticipated lead time from the primary vendor of a product. For example, say that an item took 2 to 3 weeks to receive from the primary vendor. All of those 4 elements that you see on this slide added up together equaled somewhere between 2 and 3 weeks. I'm saying that best practice is to go on the long side. Set the lead time manually equal to 3 weeks or 21 days. This will ensure that you have adequate stock to meet your customers' needs. Now, maintaining lead time manually is best practice. And to go further, we recommend that you contact primary vendors at least once a week just to see how lead times are going. If anything has happened to either speed up replenishment shipments or slow them down. Now, if you set lead times manually equal to the longest normally anticipated lead time, you're going to have good customer service. But there are exceptions in all cases. As I said before, you might sell more than you forecast. That demand per day that you see in that order point formula may not be adequate. Okay? Instead of selling 2 pieces a day, you sold 3 or even 4 pieces per day for a limited amount of time. Or no matter how good we get that anticipated lead time, there may be times when we experience an unforeseen delay in receiving that replenishment shipment. This is why we maintain safety stock, insurance inventory. Okay? Provides protection against running out of stock during the time it takes to replenish inventory. That is, during your lead time. Now, keep in mind that in a perfect world, you would never use safety stock. That's your insurance inventory. You would know exactly what you would sell during the lead time. That safety stock quantity, that insurance inventory, would always be in your warehouse on the shelf gathering dust. In fact, if we were to graph out when you actually received replenishment shipments from your vendor, you would receive them somewhere in that blue box that you see on slide 19. Half the time you would receive a replenishment shipment in when you were above that safety stock line. Why? You sold less than you forecast, or the shipment arrived a bit early. And about half the time, you would receive it after you've dropped down below that safety stock line. You've used some of your reserve inventory. Why? Well, you sold more than you had forecast, or you had a slight delay in receiving that replenishment shipment. I don't want to keep any more safety stock in my warehouse than I need, because it's not going to turn over. It's not going to provide a return on my investment. Now, all items do not require the same amount of safety stock. Some items in your inventory require more safety stock than others. You have some items that we call painful backorder items. These are products you cannot afford to be out of ever. We're going to keep more safety stock on these items. Products with erratic usage. Products with erratic usage, erratic sales, you're not going to get a good forecast on. And you may want to provide protection for those high usage, high sale months. We're going to look at that in more detail in a moment. Products with erratic lead times, you might want to keep more safety stock. But I want to minimize this particular factor by, as I said before, setting your anticipated lead times equal to the longest normally anticipated lead time from the primary vendor. You might want to keep more safety stock for high profit items. If you make a tremendous amount of money, a tremendous profit when you sell a product, you don't want to miss a sale. You always want to have it on the shelf. Stock reserved for a specific customer. If you've promised a customer that you're going to keep a certain quantity of a product on the shelf for his or for her exclusive use, this has to be part of your safety stock quantity. Finally, products with a reputation for poor quality. If you can't be sure that replenishment shipments that you receive from your vendor are going to be in good enough shape to sell to your customer or to use, you have to keep additional safety stock. Now, these are examples of items that require more safety stock than others. There are also items that require less safety stock. Items that have very consistent usage and lead times. If you know exactly what you're going to sell or use of an item, or you have a very good idea, or the lead times are very, very, very consistent, you don't need much safety stock for that item. Products with a large number of hits, remember hits are transactions, hits are sales, require less safety stock. Why? Because the more times you sell a product, the more accurate, that's the word I'm looking for, the more accurate your forecasts are going to be. Let me give you an example. If you sold 1,000 pieces one at a time during the month, you sold 1,000 pieces one at a time during the month, and you were, say, one or two transactions off, you'd still have a very good forecast, very accurate forecast. But if you sold the same number of pieces a month, if you sold 1,000 pieces a month and only one or two transactions, you had one or two hits, and you were 1 hit off or you were 2 hits off, you would be way off. So products with a large number of hits require less safety stock. Finally, low usage items, especially very expensive low usage items, you may decide not to maintain safety stock for the item. You may risk a stock out. You don't think it's worth the money to maintain insurance for that product. Keep in mind that safety stock is a very subjective decision. The level of service you want to provide your customers is a subjective decision. Now, computer systems typically will maintain safety stock one of 3 ways: as a percentage of lead time usage, of anticipated lead time demand is the first way. Here we have an example. I sell 3 pieces per day. I have a lead time of 14 days. 3 times 14 is 42. And I'm saying I want to maintain 50% of lead time usage. That would be 21 pieces. Another method that's commonly used is to maintain safety stock as a desired number of days supply of inventory. Say I wanted to keep 10 days supply of safety stock as inventory. Okay? And I'm selling 3 pieces per day. That would mean I have a safety stock of 23 pieces. Okay? A third way, which I really prefer, is to base safety stock on the deviation or the average difference between your forecast and actual demand. Okay? In this case, you can see on the slide this particular forecast. You see that the usage is very close to the forecast. Okay? Let's look at the next slide. Okay? Here, the usage differs considerably from the forecast. Okay? Goes up and down like a yo-yo from January to February to March, April, May, June. If I want to maintain safety stock for this product, I need safety stock for those high usage months. Okay? The deviation method will allow you to maintain safety stock for those high usage months. Here, I'm looking at an item, and you see 3 months worth of history: January, February, and March. In January, I had a forecast. You see it here is total demand of 50 pieces. Usage was 60 pieces. That's a deviation or a difference of 10 pieces. Okay? February, I had a forecast of 76 pieces, usage of 80. That's a deviation or a difference of 4 pieces. March, I actually sold less than I forecast. I had forecast 80 pieces. You see that under the total demand column. Total usage, I only sold 70. That's a deviation or a difference of minus 10. Okay? The total deviation for those months where the forecast was less than usage, meaning I sold more than I forecast, is 14 pieces. Okay? January and February. I don't need safety stock for March. Why? Because I forecast I would sell 80 pieces. I only sold 70. I'm overstocked. So the deviation for the 2 months where my sales exceeded the forecast, 14 pieces. Divided by those 2 months, that would be 7. And I'm going to multiply that 7 pieces times what I'll refer to as a deviation multiple, okay, of 2. Now, I have to give you a very short statistics lesson. If I multiply that average deviation of 7 pieces by a deviation multiple of 2, I'm going to get about a 95% service level. meaning I'll be able to service my customers' needs about 95% of the time. A deviation multiple of 3 will raise that to about 97.5. Now, I don't have time to go into how these numbers are derived, but if you look at it, the increases in the service level, the percentage increases, get smaller and smaller and smaller, even though I keep adding the same amount of safety stock to my inventory. Why did they get smaller and smaller and smaller? Because when you sell a product with recurring usage, you'll have a few months where you sell a very small quantity, and you'll have a few months where you sell a very large quantity, and you'll have quite a few months where you'll sell what I'm going to call a typical quantity of the product. Okay? What we're doing when we add more safety stock is saying we want to be able to handle our customers' needs in those relatively few months where I sell a large quantity of the product. But you see on this screen, I'm calling this an approximate service level. It's not exact. If I want to know pretty much exactly what my service level is going to be, I'm going to utilize a methodology that we call residual inventory analysis. Okay? And residual inventory analysis sounds like a very fancy term, but it really isn't. How do I do this? Well, I look at each item with recurring usage over the last 3 months. And I look at the forecast demand. Keep in mind, the forecast demand was what I predicted I would sell. I look at the safety stock. This is the quantity that I'm going to hold in reserve, just in case I sell more than that forecast or there's a delay in receiving a replenishment shipment. I'm going to take the combination of the forecast, that's what I predicted I would sell, and that safety stock, my reserve inventory, and compare that to actual usage, what I sold, what I used. If the forecast plus the safety stock, what I predicted I would sell in my reserved inventory, was greater than what I sold, I probably didn't have a stock out. But as you can see in that middle point, if the forecast plus the safety stock minus usage was less than or equal to 0, I might have experienced a stock out. I'm going to look at the last several months to see when I might have experienced a stock out. On slide 29, if you go over to the right, if you look at April, I had a forecast of 1,050, safety stock of 525 pieces, actual usage of 1,650. If I take 1,050 plus 525 minus 1,650, I didn't have 75 pieces on the shelf that my customers wanted. That's a negative 2.1 day supply. I might have experienced a stock out. You can use residual inventory analysis to see when you might have stocked out based on your current forecast methodology and your current safety stock. You can adjust that safety stock to avoid stockouts. This works very, very, very well. As you go through this process, you will notice that as your safety stock amounts increase, and you can see here we're going from a 2 to a 4 to a 6-week supply. As that happens, the value of that safety stock increases. The value of what I'm going to call my residual inventory increases as well. Okay? You can see that's going up. But the service level also goes up. Okay? Working with your software provider, you can determine what level of service you want to provide your customers and figure out the amount of inventory you need to provide that level of service. This works extremely, extremely, extremely well. Okay? Now, if you could order any quantity of any product you wanted to at any time, we would be done right now. But oftentimes, you have to place a certain size order with a vendor, what we call a target order. That size order that allows you to get the terms or discounts which allow you to sell that vendor's products competitively. Typically, the target order can be expressed in pieces or cartons, maybe a monetary amount, okay? Weight or cubic volume. Say you have to buy by the truckload or by the container. We'll express the target order in weight or cubic volume. Now, we're going to figure out how long it takes us to sell enough product to meet that target order requirement. This is something that we call the order cycle, or some of you may know it as a review cycle. That is the average amount of time necessary to sell, transfer, or otherwise use enough of the vendor's products to achieve the target order requirement. Now, let's look at an example of how we might calculate that order cycle. Okay? We purchase $120,000 worth of material from a vendor each year. And that vendor has a requirement of a $2,500 order for us to get the terms or discounts that allow us to sell that vendor's products competitively. Okay? If we have to place a $2,500 order, that means we can place 48 purchases per year. That's a purchase about every 8 days. Now, how is this important? Well, this is going to allow us to calculate our second parameter that I am going to call the line point. Okay? The line point is the order point plus our anticipated demand during that order cycle. Okay? This is a second minimum quantity. The line point is equal to the order point plus anticipated demand during the order cycle. Now, I say on the screen something that's very interesting. I say when you're placing an order with the vendor, you not only want to include any item that is beneath its order point, but you also want to include any item that is below its line point. Look at the illustration on slide 36. Okay? If I have an item, let me start over. If I have an item that is below the order point, that is my lead time usage plus my safety stock. I think you'd agree that we have to place an order for that item today to avoid running out of stock. Okay? Let's say, though, that we have an order cycle of 7 days. We can place an order with the vendor every 7 days. Well, if I'm placing an order today, this is Friday, October 16th, and I have an order cycle of 7 days, I am predicting I'm going to place the next order with the vendor next Friday, October 23rd. I need to include on the order I am placing today any item that is already below the order point, my lead time usage plus safety stock, or will fall below that order point before next Friday. Those are the items below the line point. Those are the items that would have a replenishment position or a net stock position somewhere in that blue box. If you place orders for items at the right time, you will ensure a very high level of customer service. Ordering at the right time protects customer service. Now, the other thing we have to consider is when you place an order with a vendor, how much do you buy? What quantity do you buy? Now, I want to buy that quantity that will make me the most money. I want to buy that quantity that will minimize my total cost of inventory. The total cost of inventory includes what I pay the vendor. This is what I call the cost of material. It includes freight. It includes customs duties. It includes anything that you write a check for associated with a specific shipment. We have the cost of replenishing inventory. This is your cost of issuing and receiving a purchase order. We have the carrying cost. If we go back and look at the cost of replenishing inventory, this includes deciding what products need to be replenished. Okay? The cost of actually issuing the purchase order, the cost of receiving that purchase order, expediting it if you have to, processing the receiving paperwork, and paying the vendor. All these things are real costs that you incur when you place an order with a vendor. We'll take all of the costs that you incur every year in those activities, divided by the number of purchase order line items that you issue through a year when you buy stock products, to come up with your cost of replenishing inventory, also known as the R cost. Now notice that we express the cost of replenishing inventory not per piece, but per line item. The theory is that it costs you the same amount to buy an item, whether you buy 1, 1,000, or 10,000 pieces of that item. You go through exactly the same thought process. It takes exactly as long to pay the vendor. Now, as I said, we express that cost of replenishing inventory per line item. If I were to graph that out, though, and express that cost of replenishing inventory per piece, we see something very interesting. In this example, I'm saying that it cost me $5 to issue a purchase order for a line item with a vendor. When I buy a product, it costs me $5 out of pocket. Now, typically, your cost of replenishing inventory is going to be somewhere between $5 and $6 per line item. We're going to use $5 in this example. If I buy one piece of the product, that one piece has to absorb all $5. Okay? That's going to come out of my profit when I sell the product. But if I buy 5 pieces, and it costs me $5 to buy the item, each of those pieces only has to absorb $1 of the $5. As you can see from this curve, that cost of replenishing inventory decreases rapidly the more I buy. Okay? The other cost that I incur when I buy products is the cost of carrying inventory, the cost of maintaining inventory in my warehouse. The cost of carrying inventory includes the cost of putting away stock receipts, moving material within the warehouse, insuring your inventory. If you have to pay any taxes on your inventory, those are included in the carrying cost. Rent utilities for the portion of your warehouse used to store material. Okay, that's part of your carrying cost. More inventory you have, the more room it needs. Okay, counting your inventory, whether you do it with a full physical inventory or you cycle count, well, if you don't buy it, you don't have to count it. If you do buy it, it's in your warehouse, yes.
I have a question. Oscar has a question here. He says, I was wondering, when calculating days, do we calculate business days? Because we use 7 days, Friday to Friday.
Okay. Do we use business days or do we use calendar days? Actually, different computer systems will use either business days or calendar days. Most use calendar days. But if your system uses business days, you really have to maintain a business day table where you specify how many days you're open. Some businesses are open 6 days, some are open 5 days, some are open 7 days a week. In these examples, I'm using calendar days. You know, it's a funny thing, and I'll just do a brief aside. Back in the late 1970s, we actually did a study whether it was better to maintain inventory parameters in business days or in calendar days, and we found that it really didn't make a large difference. But you really want to be very consistent whether you use business days or calendar days. And actually, I prefer calendar days because it's hard to figure lead times in business days. Looking at the weekends and sometimes freight travels over the weekends, there are a lot of complications. So you can do either depending on your computer system, but I don't think you'd be in any trouble at all or have any negative effects if you just used regular calendar days. But it's a very good question.
Thank you, John.
Oh, sure. Getting back to the carrying cost. These are all costs that you incur maintaining inventory in your warehouse. The more you buy, the longer part of that shipment is going to be in your warehouse. And as long as any part of that shipment that you buy is in your warehouse, it is gathering, or I should say it is absorbing, these elements of the carrying cost like a sponge. Okay? So the more you buy, the higher the carrying cost, because the longer part of that shipment is going to be in your warehouse. You can see that on this graph in that red dotted line. As that quantity ordered goes up to the right, that carrying cost increases. If I add my incoming cost, this is what I'm going to write checks for, to this chart, I get this green total cost curve. I want to buy where that total cost is at its lowest point. I want to buy where that total cost is at its lowest point. And fortunately, I don't have to draw out graphs every time I want to buy. Some very nice people by the name of Camp and Wilson determined what that lowest total cost point is and developed an equation that we call the economic order quantity formula. Now, this formula looks kind of complicated, but it really isn't. And what is nice is that you, as buyers, as distributors, as manufacturers, don't have to know the formula. That's what I have to do. All I want you to do is be able to interpret the results of this formula. Now, we're going to look at 3 examples. In this first example, I'm going to sell 25 pieces a month. This item costs $10 per piece. I have an R cost of replenishing inventory of $5 per line item, and a carrying cost of 20% per year. That's typical right now for a firm in Southern California. Now, if I put those numbers into this equation, I will get an economic order quantity of 39 pieces, which represents about a 46-day supply. Okay? Now, in the second example, instead of a unit cost of $10, I'm going to have a unit cost of $50. The other components remain exactly the same. Now, if I put these numbers into the equation, it results in an economic order quantity of 17 pieces, which is about a 20-day supply. Now, the difference between that first item and this item is the unit cost. I went from a unit cost of $10 to a unit cost of $50. In this last example, we're going to actually see if the economic order quantity, the EOQ, does vary by what I'm going to call the unit cost. Well, we have a forecast demand now of not 25 pieces, but 2,500 pieces. The unit cost is not $10, not $50, but 10 cents. Very inexpensive item. But if you look down at the bottom, I'm still buying a 46-day supply. That 3,873 pieces, if I am forecasting 2,500 pieces per month, is a 46-day supply. Now, I was buying a 46-day supply when the unit cost was $10. And I'm buying a 46-day supply when the unit cost is 10 cents. The EOQ does not vary by the unit cost of an item. It does vary by what I'm going to call dollars moving through inventory. That forecast demand times the unit cost. In the third example, 2,500 times 10 cents is $250 moving through inventory per month. And if you look back at that first example, 25 pieces times $10, again, that's $250 moving through inventory per month. If I have $250 moving through inventory per month, at that cost of carrying inventory and that cost of replenishing inventory, I'm going to buy a 46-day supply. That second item had a lot more money moving through inventory. 25 times 50 is $1,250 moving through inventory per month. I'm only going to buy a 20-day supply, less than half in terms of days supply. The EOQ will suggest when you have a lot of dollars moving through inventory, you buy less more often. The EOQ, I want to make sure you understand, will minimize your total cost of inventory, maximize your profitability. A good computer software package will always make sure that that EOQ pushes your stock level above the line point, meaning you're not going to buy less than you will sell between shipments. And it's going to go a little further than that. If the EOQ represents a very large number of days supply, if you have a very inexpensive, slow-moving item, maybe an item that costs 6 cents and you sell 6 per month, the EOQ might suggest you buy a 10-year supply. A good computer system will reduce that to equal, we like to say, no more than a 6-month supply. No matter what the EOQ results in, you don't want to buy more than a 6-month supply of the product. On the other hand, if you have a very fast-moving, expensive item, the EOQ might suggest you buy a 1 or 2 hour supply. We believe you shouldn't be buying less than, say, a 4-day or 1-week supply of any item. The EOQ will increase, or a good computer system, I should say, will increase that EOQ to equal a 4 or 7-day supply. As I said before, we will increase that EOQ to equal demand during your order review cycle, and if you have an item that has an expiration date, we don't want to buy more than we'll sell during the expiration period. Okay, we've covered a lot in 1 hour, and I know there's been some static on the line. I have no idea where it came from. I'll call the phone company, and I apologize for it. But we have discussed some details on replenishment parameters for items with sporadic usage. I really suggest that you maintain minimum and maximum stock quantities based on a multiple of the normal order quantity, the normal quantity sold or used in one transaction. For items with recurring usage, these are items that you sell on a regular basis. We're going to maintain that order point, what you sell during the lead time plus safety stock, okay, and the line point, that order point plus what you normally sell between receiving replenishment shipments from the vendor. If you order between that order and line point, you'll maintain a high level of service for your customers, and you'll maximize your profitability by ordering that economic order quantity. This will allow you to achieve what we call the goal of effective inventory management. We want you to meet or exceed your customers' expectations of product availability. But I want you to do that for the amount of each item that will maximize your net profits, or, to put another way, minimize your total inventory costs. Now, we've covered a lot in the last 55 minutes or so, but if you have questions, please feel free to give me a call at 972-304-3325 or email me at John S., that's J-O-N-S, at effectiveinventory.com. Please note that's John without the H. And with that, Jeannie, I'm going to turn it over to you, and hopefully you won't have static on your line.
Thank you very much, John. That was a great presentation. And I will have a copy of this handout emailed to everybody first thing on Tuesday. I will also have the recording available if anybody's interested in having it for your organization. Right now, we're open for questions and answers. If you have any questions, I'll go ahead and unmute the lines. Feel free to just speak up and ask your question, and John and myself will try to answer your question. Thank you. 1 second.
All participants have been unmuted.
Does anybody have any questions out there? Does if you don't have any questions, feel free to send John an email, send myself an email.
All participants have been muted.
Sorry about that. But please feel free to send us an email, send John an email, myself an email. We're here to answer your questions. I do want to let you know that we do have another EIM webinar on December 18th, and this one will be regarding inventory metrics. I will send an email out to everybody to let you know when the time gets closer so I can register you for the event. Another thing that I do want to mention, Apex, we do have ERP incentives. For Mass 90, Mass 200 users, we do offer discounts right now, a special promotion until the end of December, as well as for JDE Edward users. If you have any questions on those promotions, go ahead and send me an email. I'd be more than happy to speak to you more details about it. One last thing here, Apex, we are offering a stimulus program this year. For qualified referrals, we are offering $250 for qualified referrals. We do have a few criteria, but if you do have anyone that's interested in looking into software, we are a Microsoft Dynamics NAV provider. Please have them contact me. My email address, I will have it. You have my email address that I have. It's jtao@acsi2000.com. But yes, and if that prospect does sign with us within the 12 months, we will provide you with another $750 in the gift card form. But please send me an email if you're interested in participating with our stimulus program. And again, here's the information, John's contact information, as well as Dennis Chu's contact information. If you have any questions, please feel free to send us an email. Again, I want to thank everybody for attending, and we will see you in December. Thank you very much, and this will be the end of our session.